You are live.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. This is Daniella Levine-Cava. I'm your County Commissioner, District 8, and we are bringing you this public affairs series called Our Community Cares every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday to help all of us learn what is happening with this coronavirus here in Miami-Dade County. What are the resources here to assist us? What are some of the mental health issues, job training, job placement issues? We're running the gamut to try to be of service to the community. And today, we're really pleased to bring a special show with not one, but two attorneys from Legal Services of Greater Miami. We had a really unfortunate incident. Maybe some of you have heard about the Zoom bombing phenomenon. We had quite a very disruptive and upsetting interruption to our show on Wednesday, and unfortunately had to stop the show. So we're actually combining with that guest, Jeff Hearne, and we'll be joined by Dan Rowinsky, both of them with Legal Services of Greater Miami. So you're going to get two attorneys, two important topics very shortly. But just to put it all into perspective, we are now past 2 weeks of programming. We have had Rick Beasley from CareerSource. We had Martha Baker from SEIU and the nurses at Jackson. We had mental health issues with Jean-Pierre from CHI, talking about taking care of your mental health. So we've really had a great run, and all of those shows are on the Facebook page, so you can look down Monday, Wednesday, and Friday and find the speaker series to touch base and learn about all the information that we've brought you. This is going to be a little bit different than the previous shows because we have moved to this Facebook Live format, and you can simply Facebook, write in your comment. We will be moderating it, and then we will be able to pose the questions and the comments to our guests. So let's say, first of all, so no more chat. Just put it in the comments section, and we will get back to you. So I see that we've been joined by Jeff Hearne and Dan Rowinsky. Welcome, gentlemen. So good to see you both. This is also our first time having two guests. So we're not Zoom babies, but we're kind of Zoom teenagers here, and we're kind of getting used to it. Dan, you're frozen. So I need you to check it out because I see just a freeze frame there. But okay, while our technical expert in the background, Andrea Picardo, assists us to work out all the kinks, I will get started and say a few words about Jeff and Daniel. And also, point of personal privilege, I'm a former legal services attorney myself. This is not well known that I am still a licensed attorney in the state of Florida, as well as a social worker. And I very proudly served at Legal Services of Greater Miami for quite a few years, and I worked on education cases, landlord-tenant, Social Security, disability, and it was a wonderful experience. And I took that experience serving the public on public benefits issues, particularly to start a nonprofit called Catalyst Miami, which I'm very proud to have served for 18 years. So that's just a little bio on me, but now let's turn to our speakers. So welcome back, Jeffrey Hearne, Director of Litigation. He's the leading housing attorney at Legal Services of Greater Miami, and he also runs the Tenants' Rights Clinic at the University of Miami. And he started to tell us, until we were so rudely interrupted, some of the rights of people in this all the time, but particularly now in the coronavirus era. What can you do as a tenant to protect yourself if you are not able to pay the rent and your landlord would like to evict you? So just starting again with you, Jeff, and we'll just go through it quickly because we're going to cover both you and Daniel on the call. So a lot of people are hurting financially. They're not able to pay their basic expenses, rent for sure. The unemployment compensation system, we're going to hear about that later, is slow to get up and running. So can people be evicted?
Well, the law's even changed since we had our last call on Wednesday. So it's a little complicated because there's a lot of different things that are going on. But yesterday, the governor issued an executive order which suspends all evictions and foreclosures for 45 days. So that's through May 17th. So nobody should be evicted. You know, our view is cases shouldn't even be filed during this period. So that gives people some time to get caught up. It does not cancel the rent. It doesn't mean that the people won't owe it when the moratorium is lifted. But we have that first period of time that people are protected, and that applies to everyone. We also have the CARES Act, which is what Congress passed last week, a week ago today, and that gives 120 days protection from eviction for non-payment cases for people living in any type of affordable housing that's subsidized by the federal government, as well as anyone who's living in a property where their landlord has a mortgage that is insured or backed by the federal government. And that, people estimate, is about 70% of mortgages.
And how does someone know whether or not they live in a house that's protected that way?
So that's the hard thing, is that typically tenants don't have access to this information. So the first thing that we're encouraging people to do, if you're unsure, is to talk to your landlord, see if the landlord will tell you. But honestly, there's a lot of landlords who aren't going to know. You can go to the property records and try to find the mortgage and look at it to see if it has an FHA number or says Fannie Mae on it. And that might give you some guidance. But for anyone who's eligible for legal services to represent, they can contact our office to see if they have some uncertainty, and we can try to help them figure that out.
Why don't you go ahead and say right now how they would contact your office?
Yeah, so we're still up and running. You can contact us two ways. They can contact us online at legalservicesmiami.org. And that's probably the best place to go. It also has our phone intake hours. Our phone number is 305-576-0080. But everyone who's on Facebook Live presumably will be able to access online. And that's the easiest way, because someone will call you back to confirm your eligibility.
You know, just a little moment of nostalgia for me, because it's been so many years since I worked at Legal Services, I guess 25 or so. And that was the number back then. So I remember that number very indelibly engraved in my brain. Okay, so let's say you don't get evicted for 120 days, and now that time has run. What happens after that?
So the law says that the landlord has to give a 30-day notice to the tenant. So presumably, let's say there's still some rent owed that you haven't, maybe you've been able to pay some of the rent, but not all of it, and you still owe some money. Then the landlord has to give you 30 days to get caught up before they can then file an eviction for non-payment of rent.
Okay, great. Let's see. So let's just make sure, for somebody protected under the CARES Act, they have longer if it's one of these federally backed programs. If you don't have that benefit, then you have now under the state law 45 days moratorium because of the executive order of the governor. What about in Miami-Dade County? What protections do we have here?
So in Miami-Dade County, the police department has said they will not execute writs during the state of emergency. So we have that policy in place. So until the emergency is lifted, there's no end date on that right now. We also have the county commission passed a resolution last year to prohibit the eviction of anyone living in public housing or county-owned property. So during the state of emergency, the landlord, whether it's the county or a private entity, will not evict during a state of emergency.
And I'm actually not sure. We are in a state of emergency in Miami-Dade County, but I don't know how far that extends. But clearly, we're still in it. So I'm sure it will run through the end of this month at the very least, if not well beyond. At least it'll run as obviously with the state, and possibly, hopefully, longer. Now, what if an eviction action was started prior to the emergency orders?
So it's a little bit of an unanswered question. We have some tolling deadlines that were in place before, which might extend the deadlines, but I would say that the executive order from the governor that came down last night should mean that everything is on hold through May 17th. So I would imagine that nothing should happen in any of these cases during that period. Now, the only exception I would say is if it's an eviction unrelated to rent, there may be an argument that eviction could move forward, but we'll have to see what happens in the courts.
Okay, so very good. And they should reach out to you, and you said how, and that's very helpful. Now, if somebody is living in subsidized housing and their rent payment is based on income and they're now with a change in income, what should they do?
It's very important that they report that change of income right away to the management office, to the Section 8 office, wherever they normally do their recertification. You know, they're also going through this too, so they may be backed up. So it's really important that they document any requests or change of income, so that if it's not processed till later, you can at least have it applied retroactively.
Okay, excellent. And then what about if the landlord's not making repairs during this time and there are real serious issues?
Right, so that's one of the questions. So generally what a tenant has is the ability to send what's called a rent withholding letter saying, make these repairs or else I'm not going to pay the rent. Depending on the tenant's circumstance, that may not be much of a threat right now. And also you may have people who don't want their landlords in, or the landlord doesn't want to come in. So, you know, we're in uncharted territories. I don't have a great answer for this. I would say open lines of communication with your landlord are most important. And if that fails, contact our office and see if we can help.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. We're going to let you take a little break, but don't go far away. And we're going to turn now to your colleague, Daniel Rowinsky, and we're going to talk about unemployment benefits. This has been very much in the news, in the national news and the state news. You know, a record number of unemployment applications filed, and really unprecedented, I think, more than what had previously been the highest in this country and in Florida as well. And we have some interference. Okay. Also, we have a system in Florida that's breaking down. People can't get through. So let's ask you, Daniel, please, to tell us what are the different kinds of unemployment compensation programs that are available, and then we'll get into some of the challenges. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. I think now you can hear me, right? So there are 3 unemployment compensation programs for people who have become unemployed because of the coronavirus. But as of today, the only one running is the regular reemployment assistance program, which is regular unemployment, as it is known here in Florida, which existed before the coronavirus, during, and will exist after. The government, the federal government, enacted 2 more programs last week with the CARES Act. The first one is the Pandemic Emergency and Employment Compensation Program, and the second one is the Pandemic Unemployment Compensation Program. But these programs haven't been implemented yet. So we're waiting for these programs to be implemented for the people to be eligible for them.
Start with the states, the current program.
Commissioner, I have issues hearing you.
Okay. Can you tell us about the differences in the programs?
Oh, sure. Well, the Employment Assistance Program is essentially unemployment compensation, and it provides 12 weeks of benefits up to $275 per week. And that's for people who become unemployed because of something that is not related to their fault. So someone who's laid off, or they quit their job because of the employer, or because of medical condition. The Pandemic Emergency and Employment Compensation Program, that's essentially an extension of the state program. And they basically the federal government extended the state benefits 13 more weeks. So someone who normally would for 12 weeks and plus the 13 weeks there that program. And the third one is the PUC, or the Pandemic and Employment Compensation Program. And that one was created to deal with unemployment caused by the pandemic, and is unique compared to the other 2 programs in that people are eligible for that program if they're not eligible for the other 2, or if they have exhausted all their benefits under the other 2 programs. And the difference in terms of the amount of benefits that people can receive is under the PUC, they can receive up to 39 weeks of benefits.
So give an example of some of the people that would be eligible under that program that are not eligible under the current state program.
Sure. Under state law, people who are self-employed are not eligible for unemployment compensation. Those people will become eligible for the PUC once it becomes up and running here in Florida. And other examples of people who are normally not eligible, might not be eligible for benefits, are people who don't have an extensive work history. They haven't earned enough wages to qualify for unemployment compensation. Or I think the most important example is of someone who has to quit their job because they have to care for a child who was in a school or a daycare that closed because of the pandemic. One thing I would like to add about the last example is that that person has to be the primary caregiver in order to be eligible for the PUC of the child, and also that the employer does not provide telecommute, so the option to work from home.
Okay, great. And
obviously those includes people who are unemployed because of the virus, because they're sick or quarantined.
Okay. And how long can you get this last program, the benefit period? How many weeks?
PUC, so PUC people can get it for 3 weeks, but if they were receiving the benefits under the other first two programs I mentioned, weeks count towards the 39 weeks. So someone can get, supposedly, because they haven't implemented yet, someone should be able to receive 12 weeks, 13, plus the rest, up to 39 weeks. And one important thing about the PUC is that the PUC provides for retroactive benefits going back to January 27, 2020. So if someone became unemployed before this law became, and it happened after January 27th, and they became unemployed, those people can get weeks before the enactment of the law.
Excellent, thank you. And then there's also a difference in the amount of money. You mentioned for the state program that current in Florida was $275 maximum, but for the CARES Act, it goes up more than that, correct? And so tell us about the
correct. So, yes, that's correct. The CARES Act included basically an enhancement of the employment compensation programs. And what they did is they provide for $600 more per week for people who are eligible for employment compensation under any of the three programs I mentioned before. One thing that's important to know about this, because someone asked me about it today, is that you are not eligible for those $600. You are eligible automatically, but provided that the state, which is an agreement with the Secretary of Labor or the federal government, to start providing that benefit for Floridians. And you become eligible for that benefit once that agreement is reached. So it doesn't go retroactive.
Right. Just to clarify, people are asking, because your audio is not very clear, Daniel, I'm sorry, but the PUC is the Pandemic Unemployment Compensation. So Daniel mentioned three programs: the existing state unemployment compensation program, the benefits under the CARES Act, and now the third was the Pandemic Unemployment Compensation, or PUC, and that one is the one that goes even further, carries it out to 29 weeks, more dollars available, and is available to a wider cross-section of people. So that's those are the main differences there. So how do people file for claims under the, how do they file at all? How do they file under the basic? How do they file under the CARES Act? And how do they file under the PUC or Pandemic Unemployment Compensation programs? Okay, we're not here. I'm not hearing
Florida,
you. Okay.
They just unmute me. Hello?
Yes, we hear you now.
Yeah, because I was muted, sorry. I just want to make a clarification. It's 39 weeks under the Pandemic and Unemployment Compensation, not 29. So it's more benefits.
39. Thank you. Wonderful.
39, yes. And so people can apply online, well, presumably, because now the system is overwhelmed with people filing claims. But they can apply online at floridajobs.org, or they can call DEOs, the Department of Economic Opportunities main number, which I think is 800-204-2418, which, you know, that information is available online.
Okay. All right, we'll post the number. So you were saying the system is overwhelmed. I don't know if any of our viewers have had that personal experience, but we've heard it from so many. There are hundreds of thousands of people applying in Florida. The system is not able to handle it. People are being kicked out of the system. They're having to reboot, get a new PIN number each time, and so on. And I know I've been working hard, as have others, to push the governor to put more resources to fix this system. They've hired a call center, but still in all of the technical part of it doesn't work. It's really creating a hardship. And we want to be sure that people can have retroactive also to the date described, either January under the PUC back to January, or to the date of unemployment. So we don't want people to be penalized if they have a hard time getting into the system. So what will people need to show if they're self-employed, since this is a new part of the protection under the PUC? How would a person who was self-employed get out of it?
Yes, a very good question, because they're normally not eligible, so people don't think about this when they're thinking about unemployment compensation benefits. But what they need to show is that they were self-employed before the pandemic. And to do that, they can use their taxes from 2019, which if it shows that they have self-employment income, or what they can do is also provide, if they haven't filed their taxes, provide some statements or evidence that prove that they were self-employed before the pandemic, and that they lost their job, or that their job was reduced because of that.
Very good. And if you were receiving paid leave, do you qualify for unemployment during the period that you received the paid leave or the family paid leave?
That's a question that everyone asks. No, you're not eligible for any of the three programs while you are receiving basically some sort of like earning in a way, because that's a benefit that you earn through your employment.
Okay, great. Okay, so what would you advise people to do now if people are experiencing difficulty applying, getting through either to the phone or to the website?
Well, the first thing is patience, right? My understanding, based off the representations of the government, of the Florida government, is that, or the state, is that they're doing everything they can to have the system up and running. The second thing I would recommend is that they, if they're filing their claims online, they can just try to look for hours that they imagine there is not a lot of traffic. And the third thing that I would recommend, and let me tell you this, Commissioner, I think is, and this is something that happens all the time here in Florida, and this is just a comment on the situation, is it's tragic in a way that people are unable to file an employment compensation claims because the state cannot handle the volume, a big volume of claims, because we are in a state, Florida, that is at risk every year of having a hurricane, right? So one of the things people can do if they're frustrated with the government, or they need to look for solutions that go beyond what they can do personally, is they have a right to contact their elected officials to work for them. So that's something I also advise people to do.
Very good. And I just want to mention that State Senator Jose Javier Rodriguez has been particularly active and calling for reforms, as has Senator Annette Taddeo, Representative Javier Fernandez. I was on a call today with Debbie Mucarsel-Powell, and we talked about these challenges, and she also putting pressure. So we know that people are having a hard time getting the benefits to which they're entitled, and we know that people are eager to get them, because right now the bills are due. If you're out of work, which so many are, you know, you're very, very anxious how you're going to take care of your basic needs. Good news, you won't be evicted. But bad news, you have to wait to get this processed and receive your unemployment. So let's work together to get this resolved as quickly as possible, and speak to your elected officials, like Daniel said. And I have, by the way, put some legislation forward that will be at the County Commission, hopefully Tuesday, as well as I sent a letter to the mayor asking that he advocate actively. We are looking, apparently, in the county at providing some application assistance through the Career Source South Florida and possibly through the county libraries. So stay tuned for possibly some ability for those who do not have ready access to a computer, because right now I don't think you can apply through a smartphone. You have to use an actual computer. Also, to be able to, the governor has authorized to be able to print and submit a paper version, not only online. So that is a new change from yesterday's Governor DeSantis order. So thank you so very much, Daniel, and thank you, Jeff. And let's see, we have a few more questions that have come in. Do self-employed individuals qualify? Yes. What about real estate agents specifically? Are they included in which of these programs? Daniel.
I'd like to mention that we don't know how these programs are going to work. But presumably, they should be eligible under PUC, the Pandemic Unemployment Compensation, because my understanding is that they're independent contractors. So they will normally not be, depends on their employees, they should be eligible for reemployment assistance. If they're not employees, they're independent contractors, they will be eligible under the PUC, Pandemic Unemployment Compensation Program.
Okay, excellent. And by the way, we also know that the Congress is working on a fourth relief bill, and they're going to look at some of the gaps of things that were not covered in the first three. So if anybody has any suggestions, they're drafting it now and can certainly let our congressional delegation know. So very good. So remember, this is your chance to ask questions or make comments. We're monitoring the Facebook Live feed. And at this moment, I'm not seeing questions. So let's just say, let's go back to Jeff. Jeff, if there's anything that you want to say by wrap up or any closing words.
I would just say, I think the most important thing is really communicate with your landlord about your situation. You now have time under both the moratorium and the Federal CARES Act to figure out how you're going to try to make it work. So open lines of communication, and our office is available if you need us.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And that was, again,
305-576-0080 or legalservicesmiami.org.
Very good. Thank you so much, Jeff. And now let's go back to Daniel. Daniel, do you have any closing words or any final advice to people?
The only additional advice I have, other than what I just said before, or information before, is, like Jeff said, if you file, for people who are watching this, if you filed your unemployment compensation claim, you can do that, and you have issues in terms of your eligibility. Let's say they deny you your benefit, but not receiving as much benefits as you think you are eligible for. Contact our office, because we usually represent people in appeals of these kind of cases.
All right, excellent. And you're also available at the same telephone and email as Jeff. There's a landlord rent due question, but I think I want to underscore, just because you cannot pay the rent now doesn't mean that you are not going to be obligated to pay the rent at some time in the future, unless you're in a subsidized situation where your rent could be adjusted based on your loss of income, in which case you have to speak with your management office or the public office for public housing to let them know of your change of circumstance so they can change the rental amount due. So this is a way of delaying the payment. It's not a way of eliminating it. And of course, talking to the landlord and maybe coming up with some agreement about how you could handle it, partial payments, some reduction in the rent. We are looking, by the way, we've been told that late fees and penalties could be applied, and we are looking at asking the governor to have those waived, so that just like with utilities, for example, the county is not cutting off people's water, and is not going to be charging late fees or penalties. That same goes for Florida Power and Light, And so we want to have that same model ideally apply in the landlord-tenant situation as well.
Commissioner,
yes, please go ahead, Jeff.
one thing I forgot to add was that very important that if you're covered under the CARES Act, the landlord cannot charge a late fee during the 120 days. So there will be some protection there.
Excellent. And again, that's for people who are in the federally the federal loan housing situation where the federal government has been involved in the mortgage or the loan.
Correct.
Okay, excellent, excellent point. And so we would like to see that replicated for everybody. We're all in this together. This coronavirus is unprecedented. It's creating health and economic havoc throughout the world. This too shall pass, and these are ways that we're working together to do the best we can in these troubling times. So again, thank you so much, Jeff. Thank you, Daniel. It's a pleasure. And I'm very proud to call Legal Services of Greater Miami my former employer, and delighted that you two are on the All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you, Commissioner.
All right. Be in touch.
Bye.